Good evening, Winthrop, and welcome to the Winthrop Town Council meeting of November 23rd, 2020. We're meeting at 6 o'clock because at 7 o'clock tonight, we will be having our fall forum. This number is being held remotely. Each person is at their own home, and this will be shown live on WCAT presently and will be reshown during the week. The phone number for public comment is 1-646-558-8656. The ID number for the meeting is 816-8694-5197. I will give that again at public comment, but public comment should be limited tonight because there will also be comment during the public forum. All right, I will now call the meeting to order, and I would ask for a roll call.
Councilor Ruggiero.
Here.
Councilor Flock.
Here.
Councilor DeMarco.
Here.
Councilor Christopher.
Here.
Councilor Honan.
Here.
Councilor Farino. Councilor LeConte.
Present.
Vice President Lettieri.
Yeah.
President Boncory.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting will now come to order. Would Councilor Christopher please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? Laurisa, do you have the flag? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all. Thank you very much. I would ask everybody to remain standing, please. Please. Because this has been a very bad week in Winthrop, and we lost three important members of the community that I would like to have at least a moment of silence for. The first one is former officer Charlie Northrop. Charles Northrop was a police officer in the town for many, many years. He was a motorcycle police officer, and I remember him driving with Officer Crawford on their motorcycles. Two of them were a team, and I knew him since I was a young child. The second one is unbelievable because a very young person. He's our former town building inspector, Jim Soper, passed away 2 days ago from a heart attack, and Jim will be missed. And finally, third one is father of our counselor, Rich Farino, and former counselor, Joe Farino, who passed away from COVID at a nursing home in the North End. That is Judge Joseph Farino, who was a pillar in the Italian-American community, the veterans community. He was a national commander of the veterans, and he was our local judge, East Boston District Court. He was a legend, and he'll be greatly missed. Please have a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes as circulated?
motion.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Are there any amendments? Are there any corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by answering yes when your name is called.
Councilor Ruggiero.
Yes.
Councilor Flock.
Yes.
Councilor DeMarco.
Yes.
Councilor Christopher.
Yes.
Councilor Honan.
Yes.
Councilor Farino. Councilor LeConte.
Yes.
Vice President Lettieri.
Yes.
President Boncory.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you very much. All right. Under general information and recommendations, again, because of the change in the metric to determine, I believe we're again in the yellow. That does not mean we're not a high-risk community. And We had 17, I believe, over the weekend and another 5 today. So we are still getting a lot of cases of COVID. With the holiday coming, I hope that everybody will be extra vigilant and please wear your mask and try to social distance. I know we can't cancel Thanksgiving, but please be safe about it. Use common sense. No large gatherings because it's just going to give us another spike and we do not need that. So please wear your mask, be vigilant, and you'll hear more from Meredith Hurley under the town manager's report. We have 2 public hearings tonight, and the first public hearing was supposed to be on the tax classification for fiscal year 21, and I'm going to ask for a motion to continue that to the December 1st meeting.
Motion to continue.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye when your name is called. Denise, you're muted.
I know, I'm sorry. Councilor Ruggiero,
Yes.
Councilor Flockhart,
Yes.
Councilor DeMarco,
Yes.
Councilor Christopher,
Yes.
Councilor Honan,
Yes.
Councilor Farino, Councilor Conti,
Yes.
Vice President Lettieri,
Yes.
President Boncory.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. The second public hearing is public hearing on town council appropriating $750,025 to replace lead water service lines. Does the Finance Committee want to be heard on that?
Sure, Council President. Finance Committee, which we will give a committee report in a minute, but we did meet last night on this. This is our annual service for lead line services. This is a 10-year project that we are, I believe, in year 4 of. So we have unanimous positive recommendation from the Finance Committee. This is something that is a mandate by the state that we must do. And as I said, we're in the 4th year of this project. This will probably be another 6 years, and that will eliminate all the lead services to the houses. The cost of this project is, as it says, $750,000 for this year, and the borrowing is through MWRA, bonding from MWRA.
Do any of the public want to be heard in the public hearing? Public hearing is now open for the public. Are there any hands up?
There are no hands up at this time.
Okay. Do any councilors want to be heard? Hearing none, I will close this public hearing and take a motion to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye after your name is called.
Councilor Ruggiero,
Yes.
Councilor Flockhart,
Yes.
Councilor DeMarco,
Yes.
Councilor Christopher,
Yes.
Councilor Honan,
Yes.
Councilor Farino, Councilor Conti,
Yes.
Vice President Lettieri,
Yes.
President Boncory.
Yes.
Hearing is closed. Thank you.
Again, I am going to give you the number for calling because we are moving right into public comment. The phone number to call in for public comment is 1-646-558-8656. And the ID number is 816-8694-5197. Do we have any hands up for public comment? I see that we have 20 attendees.
There's no hands up in the public. One
See
hand.
one,
Yep.
Colleen.
Colleen Murphy.
Hi, hi.
Hi, Colleen.
Hi, how are you? Let me shut my TV off. I just want to say, I listened to the school, I listened to the school committee meeting last night, and I know you don't have any control of that. But the pain that I heard last night from students and parents, from parents who almost couldn't even finish their sentences because they were so overwhelmed with this. And, you know, from what Meredith is saying, it's not the kids, it's the parents that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. So have you given I know you can't answer this, but for me personally, to get these children back to school, and now we have to wait until January, maybe we need to shut down Winthrop again. Maybe we need to shut the restaurants and we need to shut the clubs down so that the parents can be more mindful of their social gatherings. Just my comment. It was heart-wrenching to watch that last night. And the kids, as the adults are, the elderly, the kids are the next most vulnerable in this pandemic. And our kids are really suffering. So if adults can't do what they're supposed to be doing, maybe we need to shut things down again if the numbers go up in the next week or so. Just my comment. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Colleen. Is there anyone else?
I don't see, one moment.
Leo? Yeah.
Yep. Leo, if you want to unmute your phone.
Hello.
Hi, Leo.
Hi. First, I'd like to give my condolences to the 3 that passed this week. And so I want to make my public comment on the $2.5 million mitigation agreement for the terminal extension. Many cities around the U.S. use mitigation money for standard of living issues such as soundproofing and air filters due to proximity to airports. Why is not 1 cent of the settlement that Winthrop received that went to the Winthrop Foundation gone to that cause? In fact, the foundation is now providing $100,000 to Winthrop's brand new dog park coming in 2021. I may add that the park is not even 1/10 of an acre in size from what I've seen in documentation. This money could be used for soundproofing and air filters. I want to be mindful that this is not against the dog park. In fact, I have 2 dogs of my own, one being 20 years old. But the money should be going to those affected by airport activity, and anything otherwise is truly unethical. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Is there anyone else?
Yes, sir. Hold on.
Jeremy? Did you lose him?
He popped off. It said he needed to update he couldn't speak because he wasn't using the most recent upgraded version of Zoom. Jeremy, if you want to try calling in, I don't know if you can do that. Let's see.
He's back.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Jeremy.
Thank you so much. I would like to follow up with Leo's comment. And as far as the mitigation funds for the dog park, that's a huge issue for people here in Point Shirley. And it begs the question.
We lost you again, Jeremy. We can see you, but we couldn't hear you now. Just to be honest, maybe Austin would be better to answer it, but we have been fighting for money for soundproofing and for filters with Massport. And we had a great...
I can speak to that. The Winthrop Foundation is an independent 501c3. So the Winthrop Foundation has their own meetings and they determine how they utilize their funding. So any questions about what the Winthrop Foundation has decided to fund, I think would be more appropriate to direct to the Winthrop Foundation board themselves.
All right. Also, thanks to Bob DeLeo, our representative, and Joe Boncory, and Catherine Clark. They have been fighting to get us soundproofing money and to get houses that were soundproofed 30 years ago and which are now failing to get them re-soundproofed. There was a rule in the FAA that could not be done. But thanks to the hard work of those 3 legislators and our Airport Hazards Committee, led by Gina Cassetta, who unfortunately has now resigned, and it's going to be hard shoes to fill. He got the FAA and Massport to agree that they will fund some soundproofing and filters. The problem is Massport right now is, losing a ton of money because no one is traveling, and they're even laying off some people. So we're not so sure where the next dollar will come from.
And Councilor President, one note on that as well. This wasn't a $2.5 million lump sum. It was a series of $500,000 payments based off airport construction and expansion. So if those things don't happen or they're in financial stress, we don't get that money. So the town has only been given the initial $500,000 to the Winthrop Foundation. There is a separate pilot agreement that the town has with Massport as well that is utilized by the town to supplement the general fund. That's how it's always been utilized. But sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment? I see Donna is online.
Good evening, and again,
Hi, Donna.
Yeah, hi. Condolences on the three very active and admirable members of our community. My condolences to the family. The subject is you believe I misplaced my paper. Here we go. Okay, this is on the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. And I just want to thank a number of people. Number one, Town Council President Boncory for his support and his leadership in helping to bring this commission into fruition. I know there were a number of us citizens who petitioned strongly for it. But without your support, Mr. President, and leadership, I don't think we'd be in the good position that we are right now. I want to lend a special thanks to all the town councilors who voted this commission into existence. In particular, thanks to Councilor Honan for writing her statement of, basically that hate is not an acceptable thing in our town of Winthrop. And specifically, thanks to the chairman of that commission, Andrea Baez, Secretary Reverend Walter Conley, and John Bentley, and Anthony Williams, and Sarge Patel, Suzanne Martucci Gallo, Balgetti Muslim, and Sid Balgetti for their hard work. They're trying to, as I understand from the last meeting, they're reviewing different mission statements of other committees in various communities. And we have, again, with the president's appointment, some ex officio, very much needed ex officio members from, that this is in process of administrators from both the Winthrop Police and the Winthrop Public Schools, and possibly one Winthrop that's in the offing, but, to be discussed further. But just want to thank all of those people who got this thing underway, and it's not a rubber stamp commission. The people on that board and the council president are working hard to make this a realistic and viable commission. And I thank you all, and happy Thanksgiving. And I'm
happy Thanksgiving to you.
In a timely way this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for public comment?
I don't see any hands up.
Okay. Well now, correspondence. Denise, do we have correspondence? I know we had quite a few correspondences that were directed to the council, but that were really for the school committee. There were probably more than 100 communications for and against opening on December 7th and waiting till January 4th. And most of those were also sent to the council. Were there any other ones other than the school committee ones?
Yes, we did receive one from Catherine Bell and Allison Casey Dewar, who are both and would like the council to accept the adoption of Councilor Honen's pledge. We did receive one from Shannon Poulos, who does agree with it. She has a little bit of language reconsideration she would like, of which I told her we could forward everything to the rules and ordinance. And that's it on my end.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to committee reports. And the first committee on the list is the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. And I understand that Andrea couldn't be on, but I see that John Morgan is in the audience as an attendee. John, would you like to come on and speak about the meeting?
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Hi, John.
At the last meeting that we had, I thought it was run very, very smoothly and efficiently. There was a couple of questions regarding the incident on Shirley Street, which was addressed by the police chief. And there was another issue with a resident that had a problem at the COVID site being tested. I believe through Andrea's help that issue was resolved to the satisfaction of the resident. And I'm sorry, my phone is making some noises. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yes.
I heard something. I'm sorry. I'm having trouble with my phone. I do apologize.
All right, John. Thank you for that information. I also want to say that the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations sent a motion to the council that will be taken up under new business, and that motion was to adopt the pledge that Councilor Honan has previously given to us. So that will be taken up under new business. John, do you have anything else you want to add, or to move on to the Finance Committee?
I heard some of that. No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, thank you, John, for coming on. Councilor Terry.
Thank you.
Finance Committee.
Thank you, Council President. The Finance Committee did meet last evening. We did have 3 items on the agenda. We discussed the lead line replacement project, which we talked about earlier in the public hearing, which did come back with favorable recommendation from the council. And again, the funding source for that are MWA 10-year zero interest bonds. So that we did discuss earlier. The other items on the agenda was to try to get an update on fiscal 21 budget, how we are doing in terms of income and in terms of expenses. I thank the CFO and Assistant Town Manager again for all her help. It seems like we're in an okay position right now. It's, we're not halfway through the year yet. And time will tell. I wanted to go through each individual department to see how they were doing. And it seems like we're relatively on track with the budget. The other item that was discussed at length was the Ingleside Park playground structure that was on fire last week. There is obviously significant damage there. It has been roped off. We discussed, and again, thank Anna for her help, and thank Sean Driscoll, head of Parks and Rec, for his help. They've been on top of this since literally the fire began, during the fire. We have been in touch with insurance. This is obviously a costly repair. There are different policies in terms of our insurance that we would benefit from, I guess. The structure itself, it looks like pretty much will be paid for by the town. in some way, shape, or form. The deductible in that type of policy is extremely large, and I do not believe the structure itself is covered. The initial cost estimates for the structure would be somewhere in the $60,000 to $80,000 range. The other costly item from the fire would be the surface. The rubber surface had serious melting. The cost of replacing that is substantial, probably closer to 80 or 90,000, but we do have a policy specifically for surfaces and flooring with a relatively low deductible. So we're looking into that, and we're pretty confident in that. And the third policy that we have that would affect this project would be fencing, which is also a relatively low deductible. But there is still going to be a substantial cost. This is something that I know the Finance Committee, and I can't speak for the council, but I'm pretty sure the council is taking very seriously and want to get this project complete. We do not see a time frame that would start before the spring. The major first reason for that is to install a rubber surface. You need significant days, probably 10 to 14 days of temperatures above 45, approaching 50 degrees for that surface to adhere. So this is something that we're going to do everything we can to get our ducks in a row, but we plan on trying to tackle this project in the springtime. And that was all that came out of finance last evening.
Thank you, and thank you for being on that. I know we had 3 different insurance policies, and Anna has been working on that with Sean to get it done. I know that we had an adjuster come out and look at it, but I'm glad you finally got some idea as to figures and what's going to cost us. That's why we have a finance committee, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you.
Moving on, the ordinance review committee. Stephen, Councilor Ruggiero, you want to speak on that?
Sure. Thank you, Council President. The Ordinance Review Committee had a busy week. We met twice since our last council meeting via Zoom, first on November 19th. The committee hosted a panel of former councilors to solicit feedback on the struggles and the successes that they've had with our charter and our ordinances during their tenure in public service. That was a very productive conversation, I would say. And it was just great to hear all different inputs from all different timelines of the town council. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank the following councilors for their time, input, and expertise in no particular order. Councilor Nick Delvento, Councilor Dick Gill, Councilor Craig Mail, Councilor Larry Powers, Councilor Linda Calla, Councilor Jean Maggio, and former council presidents Russ Sanford, Peter Gill, and of course our chairman, Jeff Turco, who were all in attendance on November 19th. Also on November 21st, the committee hosted its first public forum where members of the committee primarily listened to folks from the public regarding changes or updates to town government that they would like to see. This is a very well attended public forum. And now the hard part for the committee is that we're tasked with boiling down what we heard in this public forum and seeing how, if possible, these issues could be solved within the purview of the Charter Review Committee. Moving forward, the committee has Thursday, December 2nd, penciled in for its next meeting, but as always, nothing's official until it hits the calendar and the town website. So please keep an eye out for that meeting posting. And I just want to make it clear that our first public forum was this past week, but every meeting that this committee hosts is open to the public. It contains a public comment period. So please, everyone, feel free to call in, listen to one of our meetings, and join us in the discussion. The more feedback, the better. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Councilor Gerriolo. That was a good meeting on the 19th, and I was there as well. Maybe you just forgot.
I forgot. I'm sorry. And of course, our current council president, Phil Boncory, was in attendance as well. I said in no particular order, so better late than never.
That's fine. But I was unable to make it Saturday, and I'm glad to hear, that there was a good attendance on Saturday. And hopefully their meeting will be Thursday, December 3rd, because the 1st is a Tuesday, and that's when we're meeting. So the Thursday would be the
The 3rd, probably.
Yes, you're right, the 3rd. I'm sorry. I think I said the 2nd. It's Thursday, the 3rd. But
Okay.
thank
So
you.
please remember that date. Hopefully it is going to take place and it'll be on the calendar very soon. All right, any other committee reports? Did anybody else want to bring anything up on committees? Those are the only 3 I had on the agenda. Hearing none, we'll move over to the town manager's report. Austin, I think you have a health report.
Great, thank you. Since fall forum's coming up, I'd like to just focus on COVID for this town manager's report. Meredith, if you could unmute yourself and give people a little bit of an update since the last meeting. Thank you.
Sure. So the current numbers that we reported today were 752 total cases, which was up by 5 from yesterday. We're still sitting at 24 deceased. I know that we've announced the passing of Judge Farino. We're waiting to see kind of how that alert comes through. We have 49 currently isolated. So our number for isolated is going down. Our rate of increase is definitely slowing, which I'm thankful for. I did a quick projection of, so the numbers for this week that DPH releases are going to be released on Friday by 5 instead of Thursday by 5, obviously because of the holiday. So our incidence rate, I'm just going to toggle back to my, so our incidence rate last week from November 1st to the 18th was 51.3. I think DPH has us at 55, but because of discrepancies, I'm tracking it as 51.3. For the time frame, November 8th to the 21st, we would have had 83 case counts, and that would put our incidence rate at 31.5. So we are moving in the right direction. I'm unable to calculate the percent positive until they usually give me that information the day before. So that's when I would be able to kind of calculate what we're thinking about for percent positive. I expect that it'll be lower, so we'll still be in the yellow. We won't be going up to the red based on those numbers. The testing site has been extremely busy in anticipation, we believe, for the holiday. That being said, you know, our police officers have been doing an amazing work of trying to, oh, can you hear me? Sorry. So they've been doing amazing work in trying to manage the flow there. Tomorrow, the testing site is only open from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. because the Broad Institute is shutting down at 3. So they have to get the samples there by 3. And we're planning a flu clinic for Saturday, December 5th. Hoping to use a primarily appointment-based system. So I'm going to actually be tagging up with the system that Parks and Rec uses. So we'll be announcing more information. We'll be announcing more information on either Friday or Monday morning on how to do that. And that's the gist of it so far.
Great, thank you, Meredith. Does anyone have any questions for Meredith before?
Yeah.
Go ahead, guys.
Yes, just 2. Meredith, number 1, do you know how many people have been tested total?
I don't know. I can look that up and get back to you, even if it's during the fall forum. So I can only see obviously who's been tested at our site, which is a good chunk of it. So it'll give us a good indication. They max out at 500 tests a day, which I think that they've been capping pretty regularly for the last at least.
Okay. Hey, can you tell the people when we're going to have our next flu clinic?
December 5th, we're going to do one. And then we plan on doing a few more if the need is there. I know it's kind of later in the season. We're hoping to use in some capacity some CARES Act money, but waiting for some clarification on that.
Okay, but December 5th is a definite.
Yep, and then we're also going to be doing one specifically for those under the age of 18 with the school department.
Where will that be held?
This one will be at the old middle school gym.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have questions? Vice President Lettieri.
Thank you. And thank you again, Meredith, for your countless hours of work. It's very much appreciated. 3 questions. And the first one, relatively easy, since there's been an incredible amount of action, I guess, over there in terms of testing, especially this week. And obviously, like you said, a lot to be done with people getting tested before the holiday. And which I guess the positive with that is it should help our positivity rate because that denominator is going to go up that much higher. So that's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Second question in regards to that and more, I know the town manager's on and the chief is here too, and maybe not necessarily for you, Meredith, I don't want to burden you with this one, but in regards to the testing, and obviously this week it's a little crazy, but is there any thought on the traffic pattern? Because it's really been an issue these last couple of days. Maybe the town manager or the chief can talk on that.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk on that. So we're waiting to see if this is just a surge on Thanksgiving. If it remains just a surge on Thanksgiving, then we would revert back to managing it as currently designed. If it is not a surge, but a long-lasting impact on our community, then we have to make some decisions. We've started discussions with Meredith and Austin this morning, also probably about 2 weeks ago, right before Austin was out sick, we started discussions on appointment-based testing only. So if that was able to be done, Meredith is working on that, we'd go to appointment-based only. A lot of the people that are coming here are not Winthrop residents, so the positivity rate might not be affected as we might assume it is. I was down there tonight and they said yesterday they did about 700 tests yesterday. So a lot of the people are coming. I got New Jersey plates. I got people from all over the place that don't know the area. People are stopping and asking directions to the COVID site. So it's just not our people. We cannot prioritize our site for Winthrop residents only. So some of the downfalls that we're dealing with that we hope to get our hands on. If we're not allowed to go to appointment-based, if we don't have the capacity to do that, we will go to walk-up only if necessary, if these intersections keep on getting jammed like they were yesterday and last Saturday. So that I can tell you that's what's in our operational foresight moving forward. Austin, I don't know if you wanted to add anything or if I left anything out. Thank you.
Nope, you hit on everything. The consideration of additional sites, different sites, or scheduling are really our ways out of it if it continues to be a problem. And we've been discussing this for a while now. The Suffolk Downs site never really gets backed up because it's appointment only. So that's something that we've been trying to push our partners on a little bit. Thank you. And then also, any other questions for Meredith while she's still here?
I think Rob DeMarco had his hand up.
President Boncory, Jim, Vice President Lettieri addressed my question. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. And then, yes, get out of here, Meredith. I am involved in lots of calls with like managers and mayors from all over the state frequently concerning COVID. There is a heightened level of alarm right now. And it's not just in Winthrop, it's in the entire region. Our trends are getting kind of scary in terms of hospitalizations. Right now, it seems like the entire contact tracing network in our region, we have more than a third of the people aren't being contacted within 24 hours of a first contact. And then 25% of contact traces we're not even identifying. So people like Meredith and people doing this stuff all over this area are having a lot of trouble keeping up because of the caseload. So it is very difficult to get out of front of this and attend to the additional people who may be affected that not showing symptoms because the contact tracing system is essentially stressed right now. And when we lose control of the contact tracing, the testing becomes less effective because we can't help more people. And then instead of intervening with people and trying to get them to get attention from their doctor early on in the process, people get too sick and they go to the hospital. So unfortunately, as a region, there is a lot of support going around about considering rolling things back, whether it's pressure on the governor to roll things back or moving as a region. And again, in terms of rolling things back, there are only certain things that governments can control and boards of health can control. So when we consider these things in rolling back, there are only so many things, there's limitations of what a municipal or state government can do to try to intervene on the spread of COVID. One of the most difficult things that's going to happen is Thanksgiving and the holidays. We can't avoid that. And there's basically nothing a municipal or state government can do to stop people. We can do the information campaigns. You've heard multiple times tonight, please be safe on Thanksgiving. Even before this meeting, people were talking about their limited Thanksgivings that they're having. That said, there's only so much a government can do. And as I've stressed before, this comes down to a level of personal responsibility. I do think that within the next 2 weeks, there may be additional actions that come from the state concerning what phase we're in or rolling things back. Unfortunately, more than anything for the business community, because they have been one of the hardest groups of constituencies during this COVID outbreak amongst the, I mean, our hearts go out to Councilor Farino, but there are just so many groups of people that have been impacted by this. So this is mostly just in attention to the public comment that came in. There is serious consideration about rolling things back for, if you want to say, adult-focused things and not just focusing on the education of our children, because this is going to get harder. You know, the outdoor dining is kind of going away. This will become significantly harder in the coming weeks and coming months. And our numbers are unfortunately tracking worse than they were in the spring when we had some of these conversations in mid-March. So I know it's troubling to hear and it's disconcerting, and it somewhat could give people the mentality that some of these efforts are in vain, but they are not. The wearing the mask, social distancing, and washing your hands are the simple things that all of us can do to try to get to the other side of this. Just today, there was another study that came out that said if 70% of people had worn masks, we'd be on a different path with COVID right now. So we have some work to do. You can probably hear my son yelling, so I'll stop talking right now. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Austin. Does anybody have any questions for the town manager on his report? Vice President Lettieri.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments, Austin. I appreciate it. We do seem to be in a little, we seem to be, as Meredith just stated, the numbers seem to be turning a little bit, but that could all turn on a dime come Thanksgiving and thereafter. And I do agree, there's not much government can do for people. Hopefully people are smarter, and I think for the most part they are. They're in any walk of life, there are going to be people that want to push the envelope, and that's, you know, that's why we live in America, I guess. But I do have serious concerns. I did hear that the town manager has discussed not opening town hall until February 1st. I'm extremely concerned about that. There are people all over working and doing it safely. We've gotten a tremendous amount of money for this town from the CARES Act to make our building safe. There are a lot of people out there that don't have internet, that can't do business over the computer and need that connection. I'm extremely disappointed that we're looking at not opening that town hall, not having personnel in there on a regular basis. You know, this is something that—
Do you have a question about this or about my decision with this?
I have a comment right now. If we'll see if I get to a question, but I definitely have a comment. You know, again, we've been given ample money from the CARES Act to make our buildings safe. We've been told since August that we're in the process of making them safe. And now we seem to be cutting everything back. You know, I do think probably the governor will do something on youth sports over for a 2-week period coming up. I did watch the whole school committee meeting last night and respect the decision they made to go back January 4th, but it does seem to be that they were pretty insistent on going back January 4th, which it's good to see a date for kids to have in-school learning. There are a lot, you know, like numbers, you can make a number, say, and think anything you wanted to think. Obviously, the numbers are a lot worse now than they were in the spring, but there is considerable more testing done now than was in the spring. You know, fear isn't the ultimate right thing to do for everybody. Common sense works. There are more people wearing masks now. Maybe there isn't the percentage we want or 100% that we would all like to see, but there is an incredible amount, a higher percentage now wearing masks than there ever have been, and the disease is still communicating throughout, and the cases are getting more. But you know, to get back to my original point, and I guess my question, I am extremely disappointed that there has been discussion around about keeping town hall closed till February 1st. To me, that's totally unacceptable.
Okay, well, let me explain my thought process on that. And I was going to do that during the fall forum, but I'll hit this very quickly. We have not had a spreader event or an outbreak in municipal buildings because of the way that I have managed them. All I can do to keep my employees safe is look out for their best interests and try to keep them away from one another. Unfortunately, with everything happening with Thanksgiving, although everyone says they are having Thanksgiving in their own house and alone, I do not have confidence that that will be happening. Unfortunately, I think there may be cases within my staff in the coming 2 weeks that I would like to prevent spread within municipal buildings. And the only way that I can do that is by having them work remotely. This is what we were doing earlier in the year, and there has been no decline in level of service for what the town has provided. I understand that there is a strong desire from some that think that business only happens in person. What we have been doing throughout the pandemic and spending lots of CARES Act money on as well is bolstering our technology so that our employees can work remotely and actually provide us with more hours of work than they do when they're working in the office. And they can provide us services in different hours of the day. So that worked very well for months of this year. We have only been open for 2 months. Part of the reason why we were open was early voting. And that was something that we had to have a ramping up period for the early voting and an enormous presidential election. Those things are necessary. Having a treasurer, a clerk from the treasurer's office, sit in the treasurer's office, waiting for someone to ask them at their desk about a bill, rather than them work out of their home office and answer a question about the same bill, is negligible to me. So if we can still maintain a high level of service, what we are doing is supporting our department in being able to provide a high level of service remotely. It is going to be very similar to how people are working now because we have deployed additional laptops to staff, and we have been working with staff throughout this year to figure out when we get into a troubling period of COVID, as we are right now, we were able to pivot again and change the way that we provide services. Because again, the priority is providing services to the community. It's not necessarily being in an office. It's providing the services to the community. And that has been the priority. And the way that I can keep people healthy and safe and providing services to the community at this point in time is to not have them interacting in person. This is not unique to Winthrop. This is happening all over, not just the region, but the country. So I understand your disappointment in my thought process, but that is my mindset behind it. And that is why you hired me to be a town manager and manage the staff of the municipal government.
Thank you, town manager. And moving on, because we only have a few more minutes before the forum. The school committee report. School committee met last night. It was a very informative meeting. As a matter of fact, it was a 3-hour meeting, and we fielded probably over 100 calls from people. I think public comment period went for an hour and a half rather than the 30 minutes that's usually allotted for it. We heard a lot from all sides of the issue and then voted accordingly. The school report that we got from Lisa Howard was a good report showing that in January, we are getting one of the 130 schools in the Commonwealth that are getting them. We are getting the BINEX COVID testing set kits, and we will have them in school where anyone that has any kind of symptom of any kind can be tested in school and get a result in 15 minutes. And the school is now set up for once they are tested or when they do have a symptom, we have COVID rooms in the school where the students would go to while we were determining whether or not they did have the virus. We also got a report from the superintendent that out of the 1,831 students that have been surveyed, there is 25% or 460 students that are not coming back to school even when school is allowed. They want to remain remote, and they will be remaining remote. And we got some good news because of the that statistic that the people that are remote will be able to have a full-time remote teacher, and it won't be asynchronous learning, which we thought the hybrid system would have. Asynchronous learning, which is not a good way to go. The school committee voted last night to follow the request of the Board of Health and to not open the school before January 4th. That motion passed, I believe it was 5-2. So school will not open before January 4th, but hopefully on January 4th it will open. And hopefully if things get better, we can open in person and not with hybrid at all. But we have to see what develops with this possible spreader event being Thanksgiving. So that is the school committee report. Any questions on that? Councilor DeMarco.
Town Council President, there was also another vote that was taken last night regarding the return of Winthrop to MIAA sports. Can you give us a heads up on that?
Yeah, well, why don't you do it, Councilor DeMarco, because you were there.
Well, no, I actually was not there last night when I found out, but I did hear that you voted 6-1 to return to high school sports starting December 14th. Is that accurate?
What we had voted was the possibility of starting to practice, and there was a vote by the council that we could practice by the 14th, but we cannot actually be in school. If the kids aren't in school, they can't compete. So if there is a meet or a contest that's going to be happening before January 4th and the kids are not in school, they're going to have to forfeit that game. But
understood. So
the school committee did vote to allow them to practice in December.
So that they would be using the locker rooms, or they would not be using the locker rooms to get ready for practice?
I don't know what Lisa and Matt Serino are going to do about that. The vote was just to allow it. We did not get the detail.
I appreciate that. No, the only reason I ask that is because I'm trying to get my head around the fact that, you know, we don't think it's safe for our kids to go back to school in December, but locker rooms are okay and classrooms are not. That I just don't see the logic in that. That's all. I want them to go back to school and to sports as soon as possible. You know that. You know that's my position,
everybody wants them to go back to school as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Everybody does. But it's an issue that we have a superintendent. She's a professional. She will work out the details as to when and how and what's safe. And, you know, talking about locker rooms and so on is not something that the council should be getting involved in. That's a school committee decision, and it's the superintendent's decision, really, not even the school committee.
It sounds like, to the layman, it sounds like we're putting athletics before academics. That's all.
Just
all
a
I got.
clarification, Council President.
Vice President Lettieri.
Just a clarification, just so I could answer Rob's question too on the sports. The MIAA has announced that they will let sports begin on the 15th of December in terms of practicing and trying out and such. The season would begin for sports on, I believe it's January 9th, where Winthrop is at the moment heading to go back January 4th. There was a 2-week lead time before being able to participate in the game. So any games that would take place the weekend of January 9th and 10th would be, you know, like Council President said, not necessarily forfeited, but they'd have to be postponed and they could be played at a later time in the season. The MIA right now is not having conference championships or state championships. So the record doesn't matter as much. Obviously, competition is good. In terms of the vote last night, it was, since they will not be back in session until January 4th, I believe the athletic director, Matt Serino, mentioned how it would require a school committee vote or potentially a school committee policy change. So the school committee was proactive, since they might not be meeting again in a timely manner, depending on what happens. So they voted to let students participate in practices before, you know, as of December 15th. As far as locker rooms, they have to go by the rules. The rink is not allowing use of any locker rooms at all. Kids are getting dressed in cars. They, you know, so as far as transportation and rinks and locker rooms, I think that's something that you'd get more direction from the athletic director. But I do think Lisa is 100% on top of the situation. But I understand your concerns too.
Thank you, Councilor Vice President Lettieri.
Thank you
We
both.
need to move along, and I would like to now go to old business. There was a motion before us under old business, and that is to council appropriate $750,025. Councilor Lettieri, would you please?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion that the town appropriates the sum of $750,025 to pay the cost of replacing lead line services, including all costs incidental and related thereto. That to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the town manager, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, Paragraph 1, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. That the treasurer, with the approval of the town manager, is authorized all or a portion of such amounts of Mass MWRA, and in connection herewith to enter into a loan agreement and or financial assistance agreement with the authority, and otherwise to contract with the authority thereof, that the town manager is authorized to accept and expend any grants or aid available for the project, or for any financing thereof, providing that the amount of the authorized borrowing for the project shall be reduced by the amount of any such grants or aid received, that the town manager is authorized to take any other actions necessary to carry out this project, and that any premium received upon the sale of the bonds or notes approved by this order, less any premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the repayment of cost approved by this order in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
A motion has been
come out of finance with positive recommendation.
Which means it doesn't need a second. There any discussion on it? Hearing none. There's discussion. All right, Councilor Christopher.
I did just have one question about this. In regards to the state mandate, I know that this is a mandated project that we have to do a certain amount each year. I was wondering if some of the work that we had been doing in the Center Business District project could potentially be used as like banked goodwill or mileage, or however they measure these things, towards that mandate. So I guess if we're doing a certain amount of lead line replacement anyway, is that something that we could say, you know, go towards that mandate, or is that something that is considered separately?
Well, we have to do 7% of the homes every year. If there were homes in that project, though, the amount of homes we did that had lead lines could go towards this. But I don't believe if there are, there might be one, but I don't believe there are with the lead line. You know, anything we did with a lead line as part of the project would go towards that number. But we are mandated to do 7% of the total on a yearly basis. And I do think any services we did would count towards that total. But I would defer to Steve, who was here, or Anna, if they had any.
Let's not get into a debate.
No. I think it's a good question.
I'm happy to add to it if you want me to.
Yes,
Please.
Quickly if we can.
Yeah.
We have a forum to start in 2 minutes.
So we absolutely will be utilizing any full. So this is full lead line replacements is what they're asking us to remove from our system. A partial replacement, although it's certainly wanted. The 7% is for full lead line replacements. On this particular project, there was 11 full lead line replacements that we will put toward our mandate number. So we still got to come up with the the remainder of full lines. But we are removing partial lead services as well. There's over 100 partial lead services that were converted to copper. But the mandate is for full lead line replacements.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll put it to a vote. Anna, do you have a question or do you just want to explain?
Just something very quickly for the town council. On the debt service for this project, it's 10 years, 0 interest, and the value of that debt service in future years is 17 cents, would result in 17 cents in additional on the rate for water sewer. Just wanted folks to be aware that there is a cost to the rate associated with the borrowing.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. All right, and no other questions? I will put it to a vote. Please answer yes when your name is called.
Ruggiero,
Yes.
Councilor Flockhart,
Yes.
Councilor DeMarco,
Yes.
Councilor Christopher,
Yes.
Councilor Honan,
Yes.
Councilor Conti,
Yes.
Councilor Farino, Vice President Lettieri,
Yes.
Council President Boncory.
Yes.
Motion
Motion
passes.
carries. Motion carries. Moving on to new business. We have two motions under new business. One is for the town to declare surplus DPW vehicles that are behind in the parking lot behind the new building that's being built by FKO for kids only. And that municipal lot needs to be cleaned out of those surplus vehicles. So that motion and a motion, town council maintain a uniform rate for all classes of property for fiscal year 21. I would like to send to the finance committee. Both those motions under new business 13A and 13B be sent to the finance committee. 13C, a motion has been made by the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations to adopt Councilor Honan's pledge of justice statement. And we've received 2 calls about a little bit of changes to that. And Councilor Honan has agreed that she wants to look at it again and maybe do some editing to it. So I am going to refer that to the Ordinance Review Committee. No, the Rules and Ordinance Committee, so that Councilor Christopher can hold a meeting and Councilor Honan can attend that meeting, and we can get a policy that we can adopt at our next meeting on December 1st. Okay, moving on. Public comment. We're going to open up a forum immediately, so I think any public comment can wait to be brought up during the public forum. I would now entertain a motion to recess the meeting and to open the public forum, since it is now 7:04. Motion to recess. Can I have one, please?
Motion to recess.
Motion to recess. There is second.
Second.
All those in favor of recess?
Question on that, Council President? So we will be coming
Please,
back for public comment?
Yes, we will be coming back for public comment and adjournment. Okay? hearing no other discussion, all those in favor of recessing signify by saying aye when your name is called.
Councilor Ruggiero,
Yes.
Councilor Flockhart,
Yes.
Councilor DeMarco,
Yes.
Councilor Christopher,
Yes.
Councilor Honan,
Yes.
Councilor Conti,
Yes.
Councilor Farino, Council Vice President Lettieri,
No.
President Boncory.
Yes.
Motion passes to recess.
All right, I will now open the fall forum, and I will invite Town Manager Austin Faison to take over, and ask everybody else to mute yourself so that there's no interference with the fall forum, and you can come back on when question period. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President, and to the rest of the council and the community for allowing me to kind of do a little state of the town update type of thing. This is my third fall forum that I've had here. My first one was actually right when the town had hired Anna Friedman, and 2 years later, she's still here riding with us. And Dave Rodriguez is now in Medford, but you know, I was kind of getting my feet wet still then. Last year, what actually happened this same night is something that we're going to talk about later on. It's the middle school site. That actually, the vote concerning the zoning of the middle school site and the Center Business District zoning map fell the same night as the fall forum last year. So we've been working on some of the same things for the entire time that I've been here. But what I am happy to talk about is that we have made progress on some of those things. So what's going to be a little bit different tonight is that I'm going to talk a little bit about a few topics, but Anna's going to contribute. We're also going to have Councilors Honan and Christopher contribute. Chief Delahanty is going to contribute. So we're going to have a couple different smaller presentations during the presentation instead of me just talking for an hour straight, because I think everyone would like that more. So with that, let me share my screen and begin the presentation. All right, so fall forum, today's date. The focus will be on a few items. First off, COVID-19 and kind of where we stand as a town right now. With it, a financial update on where we stand in fiscal 21. An update concerning the middle school site on the good work that councilors, the joint subcommittee, along with VHB have been doing concerning getting us closer to zoning that site. A quick slide on the water sewer rate stuff, which is actually going to be a bigger topic for the meeting on December 1st next week, and then a few department updates. So moving forward, so you know, we all kind of know where we stand with COVID. Early this year, in March, was when we were first kind of introduced to it locally. There's a Biogen event and things like that. It got pretty crazy pretty quickly. I can still remember some of the initial meetings, but on March 16th, Town Hall was closed to the public, and it still remains closed to the public. We went essentially fully remote except for essential staff right then. And it was really a dramatic shift in how we provide services. And again, reiterating the point that I was making before, we're not stopping what we're doing. A mentality that because we're not in our offices, work isn't happening, it kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, I'll say, because these employees have been working hard. And just like everyone in the community has been working hard, all these parents who are passionate about students going back to school in person or needing some sort of relief from the difficult situation that we're in right now, all of the staff of the town has been dealing with these same things. We all have these common problems. And these people have been working during this. And the idea that just because they're not sitting in their seat, the work isn't being done, couldn't be further from the truth. We have done a lot during this year. Where we stand right now, as Meredith hit on earlier, her rate, I actually have the old number in here, so I updated it, 51 out of 100,000, 51 cases per 100,000 testing, and the testing percent positive rate as of the report from the 19th last week was 4.94. So we're in the yellow with that. And our testing percent positive rate is declining. That said, we're also in close proximity to some of the hardest hit communities in the entire state, and the region for that matter, in like New England, with Revere, Chelsea, and Lynn. Serious numbers there, not just within certain communities. People say it's hitting immigrant communities harder and things like that, which is certainly true, but Chelsea, Revere, and Lynn have been hit across the board. Their senior living facilities, things like that, all of them have been inundated with it. And unfortunately, these municipalities, along with Boston, are the ones that are closest to us. And it's very difficult to navigate this area and not interact with some of the hardest hit communities by COVID. And that's unfortunately not Winthrop's problem. It's just the reality of the situation and our location. So next is, during this time, as I said, we've still been providing a high level of service to the community. Public safety and public works have had no interruptions in service. Public safety and the health department sprung into action with the EOC on that same March date and ran an emergency operations center, taking calls daily for all different types of issues across the community for months. We ramped that down a little bit over the summer, but we're most likely going to have to reopen the EOC with how things may go during this winter. We have had no clusters of infections in our municipal staff, and that honestly is the thing that I'm most proud of. We can put the work aside. The staff has been largely healthy, and work isn't the whole thing, and work's not the only place you're going to get sick, but people haven't gotten sick in our buildings, and that's been pretty important to me, and it's going to keep being important to me. The Treasurer's Office and Inspectional Services were able to process payments, and Inspectional Services actually brought on a new web-based platform for building permits. So if you need a building permit, there's a whole new way to do it with our building department, with our Inspectional Services department. If you give them a call, they can walk you through it. It's actually really easy. And now these plans can be gone and reviewed instead of having to review the physical plans in person. People can review them on computers and do it a little more seamlessly and provide the same level of service as before, and ultimately approve permits and get more revenue for the town. The clerk's office managed unprecedented presidential election, I would say. The mail-in voting was larger than ever before. The parameters of early voting, when people could only have 4 people in the Harvey room at a time, and we had a line for the entire time, we did it. And the vote was covered that evening in town. We had no problems with our count. We had no problems with ballot issues or anything like that. Our clerk's office did a commendable job in pretty bad circumstances for a presidential election. So again, the work is being done. And lastly, there have been no delays in internal processes, and the town has continued to hold public meetings in a virtual format. So this has been a huge change. I mean, we're having this over Zoom right now. We had the budget presentation over Zoom. We have had council meetings over Zoom since March, and it is different. And we're all still adjusting to it. I think we all spend too much time on Zoom every day, but it's kind of what we need to do right now, again, to keep people safe. Right now, the Harvey room could fit 4 people into it safely. So it's very difficult to have a council meeting in there and have any public input. If you look at the Rio Senior Center, in that large space, we could only have 10 comfortably, which covers the council and Denise if everyone wanted to meet in person, not myself or Anna or any staff of the town, nor any public as well. So with the regulations that are still in place right now, it's very difficult for us to have meetings in person. So the virtual meetings, from my perspective, have been working quite well. And we have video records of everything. And WCATV has been able to have all of those shifted over to YouTube as well. So any meeting during the year that people may have missed, if it happened over Zoom, there should be a recording of it, which helps us, again, with transparency. Because as I've said since the beginning here, transparency is one of the big things with me, and I will continue to make it easier for people to do business in the town of Winthrop, because I do not want people to be limited to the hours that they can come into an office and do business with us. That is not how you buy anything now. Like, you can buy a car with a cell phone. The idea that you need to go in person to town hall to get a dog license, I don't know. I don't know why that's necessary. So we're trying to move in the direction of providing services in a different way. And this was not unique to COVID, but this is going to continue to happen because of COVID. And it has kind of ramped up us getting some of our ducks in a row and being able to provide some of these services in a different way. So I have to note, and I noted this before concerning the contact tracing, this has provided a lot of stress on the public health system, specifically our public health system in Winthrop. Going into this pandemic situation, we had a public health director and part-time support staff, mostly focused on social services concerning like substance abuse and things like that. That is not enough to deal with the pandemic or the multitude of issues that Director Hurley has had to deal with during this. She has had to be involved in the majority of the decision-making process for all town things. I don't think Meredith came into this job thinking she was going to have to make decisions about when tennis courts could open to the public, which basketball courts to close, how many people can vote in an election in a room. These are things that Meredith did not go to school for. She never had to consider before. And now, unfortunately, the majority of decisions that I have to make sure that Meredith or the Board of Health is also okay with. And it's all in the sense of trying to keep people safe. So we have stressed the system, and kind of like a rubber band, we've kind of stretched it as far as we can go. We have allocated CARES Act funding directly to the health department to increase some support staff, but we still will potentially be looking at more support for the health department in the future. So with that said, the staffing and the organization of the department is going to be something that's going to be re-examined and optimized. And I think it will be something that's a broader discussion during the next budget process, because what has been made clear during this is that because we do not have a robust state public health system or a very strong regional public health system, we have to rely on our local public health system. And leaving that at the feet of one person is very difficult. So Meredith has done commendable work during this. And honestly, the town owes her a debt of gratitude for the work that she has done during this pandemic. We do need to consider what help that department may need in the future to be able to not just deal with COVID, but to deal with the after effects of COVID. The mental trauma, the PTSD, the things like that, the social services that are going to be needed from the health department in the future, we may not have covered yet. And it's something that we need to be cognizant of in the future. Lastly, so some short-term steps with COVID. Starting tomorrow, and kind of midday tomorrow, Town Hall is going to close prior to the holiday. We're going to be ramping back down and being essential staff within Town Hall from November 26th until, at this point, February 1st. We're still going to have testing in town, and we're still going to have meetings. Because of the situation with the library earlier this year and the public support for the library and the desire for low library programming, we're going to have the library staff remain on and continue working to provide some of the services that they have been doing during this time. Longer term, and again, public safety, all those types of things, none of that stuff goes away. What we're trying to do is get rid of the places that people can congregate and potentially spread the disease. Longer term, we're going to continue following the guidance of scientists and health professionals. We're right next to Boston. There's a fair amount of knowledge here that has been advising myself, the governor, the speaker, all types of people all over the state concerning what their thoughts are. And again, these thoughts are getting scary again. As I said before, we are having some of the same conversations that were happening in March. Reiterating the simple steps that we will continue to say: wear your mask, social distance when at all possible, and frequent hand washing. Again, longer term, when there is a vaccine available, we will be encouraging its use, and hopefully we will have vaccination sites in town. So it has been a very unique year, and it's not going to stop. But we have continued to provide a very high level of service. DPW has done so much work around town. I mean, there was a period of time where you almost couldn't drive around town because they were doing so much work. It is commendable what our public safety officials have been doing. Again, our public health department, inspectional services has been pulling in so many building permits. We have been doing the good, hard municipal work that we have always done. We've just been doing it a little bit differently because of the situation that we're in. With that, I wanted to shift over to Anna Friedman to kind of give an update on some financials related to COVID, but also where we stand more importantly, where we stand in terms of our budget and looking forward in time.
So I'm going to spend a little bit more time tonight talking about a financial update than I think maybe we've done in the past. Obviously, there's a lot going on that impacts the finances for the town, and I want to just make sure that folks feel comfortable understanding how we evaluate the larger economic picture, how that informs our revenue projections, what we think that means for the rest of our current fiscal year, and what that might mean for next year. And I also just want to make sure that when I'm throwing around a lot of the terms that we use in municipal finance, that folks are also speaking the same language that we are, because I know not everyone spends as much time on this as I do. So the focus of the presentation on this financial update, I'm going to first just talk about some very specific impacts that COVID-19 has had on the budget. Then I'm going to talk about some general overall fiscal condition, which will include a regional economic outlook and what the impact to our local revenue could be as a result of that outlook. I'll give everyone an update on where we are so far this fiscal year, which is FY21. And then I'll touch on how things look very preliminarily for FY22. As part of that, I'm going to just do that quick 101 on some municipal finance terms to make sure folks are following along. And then I'll also just talk about quickly how those projections sort of come together, how we use prior year trends and other inputs to that, and how that has sort of been a bit upended by the current situation. And then just a very brief comment on the upcoming FY22 budget process. So first, just wanted to lay out some of the COVID-19 budget impacts. So I think for folks that were tuned into our FY21 budget process this past spring, you know very well that it required multiple revisions to our revenue projections because of COVID-19, with the public health and associated financial crises. The final budget approved by Town Council implemented a number of line item reductions. These included cuts to delaying position backfills, finding savings for fuel, cutting office supplies, conference fees. We've frozen staff longevity payments, which is technically a pay cut for many staff, and we've also frozen cost of living adjustments, et cetera. That budget, we had to take those types of actions because we were projecting a downgrade of around $300,000 in our local receipts. And so local receipts do not include property tax revenue or local aid. And that was from our initial projections in March. We had to downgrade even further from those initial projections. We also had to rely on a one-time transfer from the town's general stabilization fund to ensure our balanced budget. And this was to mitigate deeper cuts to the town and school budgets. So that is a use of a one-time revenue to pay for ongoing expenses. So that basically means that we're starting $150,000 sort of in the hole going into FY22 because we needed to make that transfer. And a quick note about how did we end last year? How did things end at the end of June? We ended okay. We froze non-essential spending during that last quarter of FY20, and that helped us turn back some funds, which will contribute toward our free cash calculation, which we're waiting for certification on that from the state right now. We also had some revenues exceed our budget estimates. They exceeded our budget by around $250,000, which is great because of where we were in the year. As of March 31st, the revenues, we were tracking to see almost $700,000 above budget revenues. So as you can see, the economic impact of COVID-19 in the final quarter last year really had a drastic impact on our revenues. So that sort of drop off really informed the conversations that we had with folks last spring based on what we were seeing at the time, and is informing how we're sort of monitoring our revenues this year as well. So some other budget impacts, as Austin mentioned, we stepped up on the spending side because of COVID-19. We used public health grants, FEMA and CARES Act funds to step up support for contact tracing, enforcement, and other public health capacity, which has been really critical, as Austin mentioned. We've additionally utilized federal funds, FEMA and the CARES Act, to support critical infrastructure and service delivery to the community. And we expect full reimbursement for these costs. The types of purchases that we've made were funding to support our emergency operations costs, so staffing there, PPE for our first responders, cleaning of town buildings, retrofitting of buildings, including the Winthrop Public Schools, consistent with state and CDC guidelines, remote work and learning costs, communication and materials for the public. We did some meal delivery for high-risk population, working on funding for shelter costs. And we've also been providing some support costs for the testing site, and among many other expenses. I would say the largest expenses were primarily our EOC costs, our PPE, and our sort of retrofitting of space to ensure safety. So the resources that were available to us and to do that, not only FEMA reimbursement, which we are reimbursed at 75% for our costs for certain eligible costs, the CARES Act funds that were allocated to the town totaled $1.6 million. Those have to be used for very specific purposes as well, but they are broader than FEMA. They unfortunately must be spent by December 30th. We are working to fully maximize all of these resources available to the town. We spent approximately $600,000 in COVID-19 related spending to date, and we have a number of purchases on the horizon that have not yet been processed through our accounting system. But we expect that as of now, we're in a good shape for those costs. After December 30th, we could have a budget impact if the federal government does not pass a further stimulus that would provide for either an extension of the CARES Act funds or some other source of relief for cities. Oh, can folks hear me, or am I breaking up? Just want to make sure.
I can hear you fine.
I can hear you.
Fine. Yep.
You're good. Yeah,
okay.
Keep going.
Yep.
All right.
Not.
So a couple other just really quick notes on some COVID-19 impacts on our budget. We noticed, some things that I think are important to kind of understand about what further impacts to some specific types of revenues could we be seeing, and what do we have to keep a close eye on. And it's because this helps inform some of the assumptions that we make going into the year and how we understand what we need to monitor as the larger economic picture unfolds. So as we mentioned, FY20 revenues landed below where we had projected they would be prior to COVID-19. Because of this, we took those actions that I mentioned earlier to get us in balance for the FY21 budget. And we're continuing to monitor these revenues on a monthly basis. Some of the things we saw at the end of FY20 was that our property tax revenues were lagging a little bit compared to prior years. We think that was primarily a timing issue, but we're keeping an eye on it. Departmental revenues were under budget. Some of this I think is related to we're not we're not necessarily issuing certain types of permits related to gathering restrictions and things like that. So because of social distancing guidelines, certain activities that might normally be happening are not necessarily happening. And so there may be revenues associated with those activities that we are foregoing as a result. We had some impacts on our enterprise funds. Our Parks and Rec and Rink were shut down for the last quarter. So we had some deficits there that will be managed as part of, that have been managed as part of our closeout process. For FY 2021, when that budget, the final budget that was approved by the town council, we were very conservative with our, I wouldn't say very conservative, actually say generally conservative with our revenue estimates, particularly meals and rooms excise. So we assumed a 25% reduction from our 2020 budget, and we assumed a 10% decrease in motor vehicle excise. Motor vehicle excise and meals and rooms, these are types of revenues that are somewhat elastic, and so they can really tend to sort of drastically change based on economic conditions, and with the restrictions on travel and social distancing and dining, that we're expecting to see quite a drop off on our meals and rooms excise. And when we talk about this later, I'll show you that we are seeing that for FY21. And just a note on our state aid, the state actually came through higher than what we had initially thought they might be able to do. They level funded us with our same level of state aid as last year. We had thought that they may need to cut that funding. So because of that level of state aid, that mitigated the use of further general stabilization funds that we had initially planned to have to use. So that was really helpful. The state was able to do that for us. So as we're going through and talking about, sorry everybody, as we're talking about fiscal condition, what does that mean and why is that important? So it means the ability to maintain existing service levels, withstand local and regional economic disruptions and meet the demands of natural growth, decline, and change. So in other words, how financially resilient is the community to meet internal and external financial challenges? And I think we all agree we certainly are experiencing some financial challenges right now, and resiliency is going to be really important to make sure that we can mitigate this with as few impacts as possible to service delivery and other needs that the community has. So because we all recognize that we're dealing with these additional pressures, it's important for us to sort of look outside Winthrop a little bit and figure out what's going on and how might it impact us. So we are experiencing, recession due to a global pandemic. It's a health crisis that has caused an economic crisis. And I will say, I want to cite these notes are from the Mass Taxpayers Foundation. They're a local group that provides economic forecasting to those at the state that review revenues for the state's budget. So I've been borrowing some input that they provided to folks up there when they updated their revenues for the state budget. So this is from one of their presentations. One thing to note is that, as I think we all remember, the shutdown was really sudden, steep, and it really affected all sectors of the economy, including the sort of historical, education and medical, the eds and meds as they call it, that we really provide a lot of the economy in Massachusetts. The local economists that presented to the state when the state was updating their revenue numbers, one of the things that I wrote down, they said federal funds have kept the economy afloat. They said without these payments, the situation would be far worse. So in saying that the stimulus funds for the CARES Act run out the end of December, that is a concern and a significant watch area for us and for our budget. And because it's not just affecting Winthrop's budget, it's affecting budgets and households and businesses all across the state and across the country. So I think this was a really important point that the Mass Taxpayers Foundation mentioned, that estimates that the cash infusion of approximately $15.8 billion in federal payments from various unemployment insurance programs and IRS checks that Massachusetts individuals have received since March to moderate the economic shocks of the pandemic helped offset about 2/3 of the estimated $24 billion in lost wages from job losses. So that really shows that the CARES Act and the other stimulus involved there really helped to kind of mitigate. And it's been difficult, but it would have been even more difficult without that. And so hopefully, from my perspective, it shows that additional stimulus would be helpful in continuing to kind of mitigate the situation that we're in right now. So I think this term unprecedented uncertainty is exactly the way that I would categorize the situation that we're in as well, and trying to kind of see what it means and where we can expect to go from here financially. Some really quick notes, and Austin mentioned this concern for the business community, some local economic impacts of COVID-19. declines in small business, revenue for small business, our hotel market, sharp decline, restaurants decline, large reductions in employment as well for restaurants. And so that there was also general lessening business confidence earlier this fall for some regional surveys that were done in Massachusetts as well. And so we have to take that into account when I'm sort of trying to understand how we might, what the next few months might bring in terms of the impacts to Winthrop. So a couple other just really quick notes on regional economic outlook. There's some contradictions in our economy that are a bit confusing. So if there's pent-up demand, that should mean a fast recovery, but it's the deep damage that may be done from job loss, and some of those are permanent job losses, could mean a slow recovery. So that's the long tail. So from like a U with a long tail coming out of that tail could mean a slow recovery. We have a high-performing stock market, but also high unemployment. And some industries are deeply hurt while others are thriving. The economy is near recession, but the housing market is strong. So all of that is confusing and contradictory to some extent, and sort of hard to kind of understand what it then means. I just thought this chart below here was informative to that, informing the revenue projections that we're doing, that this is a figure also from Mass Taxpayers. They use data from Moody's Analytics to generate this figure, but it shows Massachusetts unemployment, and it shows, even as we're going forward into the next year, it doesn't show all of those jobs being recovered. So I think that's something to keep a very close eye on to understand what that might mean. So what does all this mean for Winthrop? That's the big question. So these next few notes are assumptions that I think this is sort of just personal kind of indicators that I'm taking from this information. So I can assume that this is a continued downward pressure on Winthrop's revenues for this year, and potentially also next year. This could mean possibly little or no state increases for FY22. It depends on what the recovery looks like. I think it's clearly continued increasing strain on our residents trying to pay their mortgages and other bills. It's very likely less visitors to town in the near term, which would mean continued low meals and rooms excise tax revenues. And again, potentially less revenue from certain permitted items due to potential continuing social distancing requirements. And also continuing to be concerned that our CARES Act funds are no longer available after December without further action by Congress and the president. So some good news though, I'm not all doom and gloom. I think as we've seen, there's been some exciting news about vaccine breakthroughs and potentially distribution of vaccines potentially in the near term. I think it's still being sorted out what the resources look like for distribution and the timing when that will happen and what that all means to the recovery and sort of getting to the other end of this. So it's kind of unclear how that will necessarily go and what that might mean for potentially stabilizing things financially. And again, just potential further stimulus that would help stabilize businesses, workers, and state and local governments. If the federal government decides to take action on that, I think that certainly would continue to kind of prop things up while the recovery is underway. So how do things look for this year? One thing I really want to note, and I put it in bold, revenue projections are always a guess, very much a guess, and are determined using historical data, which helps to make an informed guess. However, there's really no historical data for the scenario we're in right now. So this is really a crystal ball exercise, much more than our normal look back. And so that normal look back using trends isn't really appropriate for this instance. So there is more uncertainty in the projections that we have than usual. We are analyzing and updating revenue projections monthly. And so where I am right now, our year-to-date revenues for FY21 are underperforming by around 8.5% versus this point in time last fiscal year. So if you looked at and this is through the end of October, if you looked at through the end of October as of last year, we were 8.5% better than where we are right now. If that current trend continues, we may not generate any free cash from above budget revenues this year. So basically, if I take the trends that we're seeing so far this year and I carry them forward, we pretty much land right on budget with really no excess. If the revenue models start to resemble our historical collections without sort of this kind of drop off from COVID-19, then we're likely to generate a modest amount of above budget revenue. I don't think it would look like what we've been accustomed to seeing in previous years. And those above budget revenues are what we use to replenish our reserves. If the revenues deteriorate further, then that may likely require adjustments to spending or other management actions may be necessary to ensure a balanced budget. just a quick note on a couple of specific revenues. The ones that are particularly underperforming thus far are our meals excise and our rooms excise, which is not surprising. A quick note there, some of that money we may actually see come in that will be sort of a one-time boost in FY22 because there's a delay in reporting of some of that money to the state. And so we may actually see some, it's hard for us to know exactly how much of that is truly lost. But I think we may see some of that money come in the beginning of FY22 potentially. Our motor vehicle excise revenues are also down. However, I'm not quite as worried about that right now, as it looks like at the state level, motor vehicle sales taxes are up. So it looks like folks are purchasing motor vehicles. So I'm hoping that some of that means that we will be on budget for that by the end of this year. The bill for that goes out in the new year. And then other departmental revenues such as fines and forfeits and investment income are lower as well. Okay, so getting into FY22, so looking forward. And I just wanted to kind of ground us in a few basics before I get into talking about FY22 and how we kind of compile the inputs to this when thinking about the projection that will then inform the FY22 budget process. So really quickly, this slide just demonstrates we are very reliant on property taxes for revenue, almost 65%. The next largest bucket is our state aid. And then those other sort of cluster of revenues there, those really make up our local receipts, with motor vehicle excise being the largest part of it. And then separately, pilots as well are very important to Winthrop on the agreements that we have with Massport and the MWRA. So primarily, property taxes and state aid is sort of our biggest driver of revenue. So when we're talking about property taxes, what are we actually sort of talking about? Because we throw in a lot of these words, and I just want to make sure that I know a lot of folks, particularly on the council, are very familiar with this, but if folks in the community may not be, I just wanted to take 2 minutes to just kind of walk through this with everybody, because as you saw, it's 65% of our revenue for our budget. So Proposition 2.5, which folks have probably heard of, the statute that places constraints on the amount of the levy, which is the tax raised by a municipality, and how much that levy can be increased from year to year. So the first thing to know about this is that a community cannot levy or tax more than 2.5% of the total full and fair cash value of all taxable real and personal property in the community. So that is referred to as the levy ceiling, which if you look right up here, this is the levy ceiling in this little graphic that I always find really helpful. Second, a community's levy is also constrained in that it can only increase by a certain amount from year to year, which is referred to as the levy limit. And so there's 2 levy limits, and I'll explain that. The levy limit is always below or equal to the levy ceiling. The levy limit can never be above the levy ceiling. So the levy limit is increased year to year as long as it remains below the levy ceiling, and increases in the levy limit are due to an automatic 2.5% increase. So here in this, so if we say here, let's assume this is FY21, going into FY22, we get an automatic 2.5% increase. So then we're up here. And then this doesn't require any action on the part of local officials. The Department of Revenue calculates this increase automatically. The second part is then new growth, which is this portion here. So a community can increase its levy limit each year to reflect new growth in the tax base. So assessors are required to submit information on growth in the tax base for approval by the state as part of the tax rate setting process. So what is new growth? That includes properties that have increased in assessed valuation since the prior year because of development or other changes, new personal property, new subdivision parcels, and condo conversions. And so that is this level here that we just talked about. And the discussion about sort of new growth will happen more at the meeting on December 1st when we talk, when the deputy assessor presents on the tax rate. So one other quick thing to note, Proposition 2.5 provides communities with some flexibility to levy above its levy limit. So once you say, so we're here, FY21, 2.5 increase plus new growth, then here is our new levy limit. So that whatever that number is, that then is where we're at for FY22. So there's a couple ways that you can actually go above that levy limit if the community so chose to do that. So one way is a debt exclusion. This is a temporary increase above it for the payment of certain capital projects, specifically typically for the payment of specific debt service costs. For example, Winthrop financed its new middle high school and a number of other projects with a debt exclusion. So this allowed the spending we have to make to pay off the debt on the bond proceeds that were spent for the project. As we continue to make payments per our financing schedule, that debt exclusion is reduced. And so that's temporary, that will come back down and you would still be here. And then there's an override, which is a permanent increase above the levy limit. So that allows communities to assess taxes in excess. So if there's an if the community ever voted to do an override, it would reset this base to somewhere up here based on the value of that override. And that would be the new base off of which you would then start doing these calculations in future years. So I just wanted to just give everyone that quick 101. Thank you for indulging me on that. We throw around these words a lot, just make sure people were comfortable with those. A quick note on new growth. Like I said, I want to defer to the deputy assessor who will talk more about this at some point, I believe next week. Likely to not be quite as strong as recent years due to the pandemic, but I think we still have some positive news to talk about there. And that will be talked about next week. So kind of giving some more, now we have to kind of talk about like those things, those two sort of steps we just talked about. How are those further informed and what do those steps look like? So assessed values in Winthrop are continuing to rise. There was a banner year from 18 to 19, we had an 11% increase. And again, we do expect some growth for 2021 despite pandemic and economic crisis. And this is just another quick example of how our new growth has looked over time. You can sort of see it dipped a bit during the previous recession. And so we'll see how that looks for this year. So then property taxes, what does all of this mean? How does this translate into tax bills for Winthrop's residents? I just wanted to quickly mention this so that it makes it more tangible when folks can sort of relate it back to their own households. So this slide here is tax bill compared to tax rate. So what this is actually demonstrating is that the average tax bill, and actually I'll get this on the next page, but the average tax bill in Winthrop right now is increasing while our actual tax rate is decreasing. So this is due to increasing assessed values. So here is your average tax bill for average single family tax bill in 2020, that's $6,285. So that is going up. And then what's then interesting then is that the actual rate is actually decreasing. We have all the same, to date, Winthrop has had a uniform tax rate. So as you can see, it's actually been decreasing. And that's despite values are going up, the tax rate is actually going down. But that means that the assessed values are basically going up faster than the tax rate is going down. And the Proposition 2.5 sort of puts the restrictions on there, which then mitigates which is what causes this to decrease because the values are increasing at such a certain rate. Okay, and this basically just gets to that same point. While average single family tax bills have grown each year, property values have increased even more, which you can see here. Average single family tax bill as a percent of average single family assessed. The tax bill is a lower percentage of the value of the house than it has been previously. Okay, override capacity. So this is just to provide some information to the community. When we looked at that, little table further back and talked about overrides, and we talked about levy limits and levy ceilings. The override is how much space you have between your current levy limit and your levy ceiling. So where this says there's very little excess levy capacity, that's basically saying we levy just up to our levy limit. So not up to our levy ceiling, but our levy limit. We basically get every single, as much as we can, we levy up to that limit as much as we can. Some communities are well below that. We are right at it. We have basically a couple $1,000 and that's it. And it's impossible to get it because of rounding. However, above that limit, there is over 37.5 million in override capacity. And so that is actually 55.57% of the levy ceiling. So that means that the capacity above the limit is actually greater than the capacity that is being levied right now. So if the community ever decided that it wanted to evaluate an override for some reason, there certainly is capacity there to accommodate such an override if that was ever on the table. Let's see, or a debt exclusion as well. And I just quickly wanted to give some additional context for the budget. What does this mean for total budget per capita? Our FY20 budget was $2,947 total budget per capita. And this amounts to the 65th lowest out of all 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. So I think that means that our budget is somewhat efficient in terms of delivering services on a per capita basis. I sort of put some other towns in here so we can see where we are. Winthrop is here. We're around some Shelburne, Hampton, Holden, Orange, Northridge, Springfield, East Hampton, Medford, are those that are sort of similar per capita budgets as well. So going back, just since we kind of talked about those inputs to the terms that we use for projecting revenues, wanted to kind of also then talk about local receipts, which is different from the property taxes that we were just talking about. So we have had, and this is sort of this is what we would typically be pulling on primarily for our projections, looking into next year for our local receipts and for this year. We'd be looking at consistent growth from the previous 2 years in our revenue lines. However, like we said, unprecedented uncertainty, we really can't we cannot use these assumptions at the current time. Hopefully we get back to the point where we can. And so this right here is a pre-COVID history on our growth of our local receipts. They looked good. They were very stable and very steady. I also wanted to just throw up this financial state projections pre-COVID. So this is actually a chart that we put together last year, and I wanted to keep it as kind of like a benchmark, sort of a pre-COVID understanding of where we were. And I think it also just tells an important story that the community should be aware of, which is that we do have our revenues and our expenses. Our revenues are not growing at the same pace as our expenses. So because of Proposition 2.5, tax revenue, as we talked about, only grows 2.5%. If we assume this chart right here actually assumes tax revenue growing at 2.5%, local aid growing at 2.6%, which is probably more generous than what is on the horizon. And this assumes local receipts growing 1.5%. You can then see that if our expenditure lines grow at 3%, that's not affordable. That means that you can see the lines separating, and you can see that we have budget gaps growing further in the future. So this existed prior to COVID-19. This is a chart that was prior to COVID-19. This local aid number is 0% for this year. Local receipts are not quite 0%, but are lower. And some of them are actually negative numbers. So as you can imagine, this gap will continue. COVID-19 has now created a situation where this gap could be getting even bigger and bigger and bigger. So we do have a structural budget deficit that needs attention. And particularly also, I mentioned earlier that we drew from our stabilization fund to help close the budget gap this year. So that just forces these lines apart, because that revenue is not, this is only ongoing revenue. So that revenue does not count as part of this line. And so to the extent that we are taking action to make these lines come together, because we have to have a balanced budget, that means we need to either identify further revenue sources or we have to make cuts. So what does all this mean rolling up into FY22? I've included over here, this is referenced from last year and the year before. It's the numbers that inform that chart earlier on the property taxes. And you can see that the increase going into FY21 from FY20 was a little over 900,000 in new property tax revenue. So these numbers are fairly standard. The number that will be changing potentially is our estimate for new growth going into next year. So I've done a very, very preliminary estimate on where we might be in terms of this number going into next year. And I'm saying potentially around 930,000 in additional tax revenue. Again, it depends on what our new growth number looks like. State aid. So it really depends on how things are going at the state level. If we are still dealing with substantial impacts from COVID-19, it's possible they could level fund us again. It's possible they could also cut our state aid. I'm noting here, if they are able to do a 1% increase for us, that would be approximately $100,000 in new revenue. And then local receipts. So that's pretty much all the rest of those revenue categories, the excise taxes and other fees. Based on recent trends in COVID-19 impacts, this could be up about $185,000, which includes our pilot payment, which is actually the bulk of that increase because that's a written agreement. And so the remainder of that is a very small increase based on where I think we probably will be. And again, these are very preliminary, changing every couple of weeks as we update our updates based on our collections. So I think I'll have more to say on that, I think probably later in January and February when we start having our preliminary meetings with the Finance Committee on FY22 budget discussions. And then really quickly, so what does all that sort of mean for a budgeting conversation for next year? So it means, I think, difficult conversations because we have substantial fixed costs, our utilities, benefits, property insurance, et cetera. You know, those costs, they go up and they, you know, they're required. So I think if you look over here, this general fund expenses by function, about 40% is the school. About 20% is called unclassified, but it's mostly these fixed costs. 15% is our public safety. This is our debt service on our projects that have already underway. And this is public works. Orange is public works, and then blue is general government. I realize I'm using my mouse and not on the screen that you all can see. Sorry about that. The school budget growth, I think, in light of where it looks like we're going to be for our revenue increases, you know, the school, based on their needs-based budget, you know, the growth has been around $2 million or more in recent years, and so we've not been meeting that. We've not been meeting their needs-based budget. We actually have not been meeting fully meeting their level service budget request, at least for FY21. And so, you know, if that budget request is, you know, $1 million or above, it's clear to see that based on their types of revenues that we're bringing in, that's very hard for us to sort of fully fund those. And so what that means is, you know, difficult decisions potentially. And on the town side, similarly, town contracts, personnel contracts, and other inflationary costs, and then because we used one-time resources, we have to make that up. We can't continue to use one-time resources for ongoing expenses. The rating agencies would not be, it's not best practice. The rating agencies could have concerns with that at some point with us. I think they've been somewhat lenient this year, understanding that everyone is going through a difficult time, but we need to be able to show that we have a plan to stop using that and to build back the resources that we have pulled from. So then, just briefly for folks, what comes next? We are about to launch our department heads are going to be submitting their budget requests for operating and capital. We work with the council on goals and objectives. February, we're working to create our documents internally, working with the school. In March, the town manager will be presenting his budget. And March, April, and May, we have hearings with the finance committee and town council. And then by the end of June, the town council votes on the final budget. And then this is also just a quick note on the fact that we've been working to incorporate metrics and working on feedback of COVID-19 on metrics, and also that we're going to continue to seek out the Distinguished Budget Award and use the goals, objectives, and metrics to be sort of the measure of potential outcomes and how we, that informs how we allocate resources. So that's a lot that I just ran through. I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I hope I didn't put everybody to sleep. So back over to Austin.
Thank you, Anna. And if there's questions for Anna, let's hit them up at the end. I will now share my screen again. Oops, that's not where I wanted to be. All right, so the middle school site, that's our next thing. There's a joint committee that the council president put together that held two public meetings this year to present and hear community input on the potential rezoning process of the middle school site. Simultaneously, there were ideas that were surveyed during the WIN 2030 public surveys. The building remains largely unoccupied, and the town pays insurance on the vacant building and some utilities and things like that. And the site needs to be rezoned to be developed into anything else. With that, I would shift it over to Councilor Honan and Councilor Christopher to give a quick update on this.
Thanks, Austin. So the old middle school joint committee, which consists of the rules and ordinance and the economic development committees, held two meetings, as Austin said, this summer, which were facilitated by the engineering company VHB in order to offer more transparency to the Winthrop community in regard to the development of the middle school site. And as the middle school building has been vacant for a number of years, as Austin mentioned, and in light of the fact that there are significant costs associated with maintaining the empty building, it behooves the town of Winthrop to move forward with the sale and subsequent development of the site. And as we all know, there have been several committees and plans over the past 7 years which have reviewed and evaluated the site for development. But in the interest of transparency and community engagement, we thought that it was important to again bring the conversation to the community through the joint committee. Our joint committee will be summarizing what we've garnered from the meetings and submit that summary with a proposal for zoning to the planning board in the coming months. Based on the feedback garnered from the community meetings held this summer, as well as the meeting last fall, when inclusion of the old middle school into the CBD had been voted down, we will look into writing specific stipulations into the existing CBD zoning, which will hopefully address the concerns of the community, namely issues of parking, setbacks, ground floor uses, and height restrictions for any new construction, which will abut the existing properties. We'll soon be meeting with our legal representation, KP Law, in order to determine if and how these stipulations can be added to the current CBD zoning. And if that route is deemed inadvisable or not feasible, then we'll explore other zoning options. So in summarizing VHB's meetings that they held here, Jeffrey Morrison Logan recommended that before zoning is adopted, that a site survey be conducted with a title research to clearly define the property boundaries. As well, he recommended that we determine the land value of the study area properties, costs for demolishing the existing buildings, incentives the town could potentially offer in the redevelopment process, and to develop a hypothetical development scenario based on the proposed zoning and bulk standards. So we're going to work with the town manager's office to accomplish these tasks in the coming months. As well, we look forward to having a planner in Winthrop sometime in the new year who could also help completing these tasks. Thanks, Austin.
So I was just going to jump in. Thank you, Tracy, for that overview of what the Joint Committee has been up to over the past couple months. And I do think that they've been very helpful. But I think that we are in a place now where we can start to move forward with the legal process of rezoning through the roadmap that Tracy just put out. This is something that we knew we were going to have to do the day after we voted as a community 7 years ago to have a new school that wasn't going to be on that site anymore. This is the third committee that I'm aware of that has had the sole objective of putting that site to use. So we've spent a great deal of time and money on this, and up until now, we just really haven't been able to come up with a solution here. And I think that it's because we have a lot of different, it's a site where so many different people have different visions for what they want to do with it. And we really need to boil that down for for a direction that the community can really go in. I think that what's important in thinking about this site is that there's a distinction between what we zone it for and what we use it as. And that's something that the community will have distinct opportunities to address at different times. The zoning is really the guardrails along the highway that we're going on. We're just providing guardrails, which just that. We're not telling people where to drive. The process of the RFP, which is going to be driven by the town manager's office, is going to be the opportunity for individuals to sit there and say, this is how we want that site to be used. The community and the neighborhood that surrounds it really has protections here that they wouldn't have otherwise. Because the town owns the site, it's not like a rezoning situation where you'd be giving an individual rights that they wouldn't have had prior to this. So we do have a lot of opportunities still for individuals to come and talk about what the what the use of that site should be, which is where I really feel like a lot of the discussion has hinged on. Not so much what the parameters for what could go in there were. If individuals still believe that there is or there should be a public use to it, recreation facilities, the rink is always something that people talk about. The rezoning process isn't going to stop us from doing that or from continuing to use it in that way. The time for those debates, I think, comes more aptly with the RFP process and when someone is actually bidding on the property to say, this is what we want to do with it. The fact of the matter is that that property is currently zoned for residential A. And we have put that site out for bid and come back largely empty-handed, because we're not telling people who might come there and do something with the property sufficiently what we want to do with that property as a community. So it's important that we provide some type of vision as a community for what we want there. And that's why this work is really so important for the future development of that site and for the future of our business district. So with that, I do want to move forward, and I think that we will, and I'm excited to have had the feedback, to have had the experiences of the two other committees that have talked about this. And I think we're in a good position to move forward with it.
Great. Thank you, Councilors Honan and Christopher. Again, it is very clear to me and my office how much of a priority this is for the town of Winthrop. Not necessarily what needs to go on that site, but a desire for that site to be utilized for something. So we continue to make progress on this, and there are some concrete steps that have been made in the past year through this process, and we will continue moving forward. I also don't want people to think that the RFP process happens solely in my office. There will most likely be either a committee that helps with the putting together the RFP, but there will also definitely be a committee that will review any bids. So there will never be a situation where something like my office is unilaterally making a decision about this site. This is a community asset. The community needs and will have its input in the future of this site. So again, it's very exciting to continue to moving forward, because it was a little defeating last year when the site wasn't voted on concerning the zoning and with the expansion of the CBD map, because we knew there was a long process ahead of us. So we're going to continue going in the same fashion towards, again, getting the site rezoned, because it needs to be rezoned for something to happen at it. Moving forward, so water and sewer, I just want to hit on a couple things. We'll hit on this more when Dick Hinkson is here next week. Very briefly, the equity of rates and the need for an audit have been requested by community members. A year ago, or geez, it's almost 2 years ago now, there was protests in town concerning the first time I increased water rates. I went to a protest. There was a lot of attention on it. We raised them in February of 19, and then the rate was raised again by $1 on July 1, of this year, of 2020. So it seems like there's a clear desire for a deep dive on the town's rate structure, and it's been expressed. We're going to engage with a consultant for a study, and we'll further engage with the community when appropriate. And what the study is really going to look at is the equity of rates. Briefly, Anna, do you want to unmute yourself and just talk about where the town may have some potential exposure concerning the equity of the rates? You're muted.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Sorry. So we've been doing substantial research on this, understanding the concerns that have been raised in our time here. And what we've been researching in particular, I think folks have noted in the MWRA annual reports that it looks like we have substantially higher average rates and sort of bills by folks in town than other MWRA communities. And just preliminarily, because we'll, I think, talk a lot more about this next week, but statute requires that there be a tiered rate for water usage. And we have a uniform rate right now. So it's something that we believe is worthy of exploring with someone on the outside to help us understand what that would look like for the town if the town were to pursue such an adjustment consistent with statute. So it is something that, you know, in light of the fact that it is in statute and we're not consistent with that statute, that we believe it requires specific action to evaluate what that would look like and also sort of evaluate some other inputs that contribute to the rate sort of being structured in the way that it is. Austin, do you want me to get into more than that, or is that where you want to leave it for tonight?
No, you can leave it there for now. Just the need for additional looking, even from our perspective. So again, those rates are made up of the MWRA assessment, debt finance, infrastructure work, and the staff. The water and sewer enterprise funds are annually audited by an outside auditing firm, and the town council's auditor assists the town in modeling out billing, collections, and usage that determine the rate needed for the fund. So again, these are not things that we blindly come up with based off desires or anything like that. It is, we get an MWRA assessment, we have debt associated with work that we have done over the years, and we have to figure out the rate that works to pay our bills. There's going to be more discussion about this next week, and we can leave it at that. And if there are members who are listening right now who are interested in that, please join us next week for additional discussion concerning the water sewer rate. So quickly with some departmental updates. First, I would like Chief Delahanty to unmute himself and give a quick update about some important stuff that has kind of come about in this. Again, I keep using the word interesting and unique, but this interesting and unique year in terms of communities reflecting on policing strategies, how we do police, how our police interacts with the public, and trying to provide the highest level of service that we can. So if Chief, if you could unmute yourself, then give your quick update.
Thank you. So before we start with that quick update, I just wanted to read something that I prepared. I think it really speaks to the teamwork that goes on in Winthrop. No one department does it all. But as Thanksgiving week approached, I began to think about what we should be thankful for, what I should be thankful for. In this year, specifically, was filled with distractions, controversy, and at times hate. Putting all those things aside, I did come up with a list, a laundry list, and I'll make it brief. First of all, family, friends, and health would have to be at the top of my list. Without their support for my wife, my daughters, family members, and friends, I could not be as an effective leader as I have been over my tenure as chief. The community support, without the support of volunteers of the food bank, Father Walter of the food pantry, St. John's Church, Mark Wallace at the marketplace, Paul Marks, Mia Mori, and other businesses who don't want to be named, the Boy Scouts, Police Explorers, high school volunteers who responded to the call for help during this pandemic. Thank you. Without them, we could not have provided breakfast, lunches, and dinners to so many throughout this pandemic and in this community, which we still are doing. So thank you for standing out there in the cold and bringing the food in to Father Walter's food pantry. Other departments, I'm glad that Austin started out with the health department. Gratitude is nice to pay, but also I think we really need to look at, as Austin's going to do on the next fiscal year. Meredith, works 60 to 70 hours a week, and she's a 35-hour-a-week employee. So she's really gratitude's good, but I think we really need to show her that we appreciate her financially as well. The fire department, DPW, cleaning our cruisers and making sure that our stations are clean throughout this pandemic. The schools, the senior center, parks and recs, and special services all have helped to support each other, to feed, clothe, and house, and or find support for people in this community throughout this pandemic. The manager's office, the council, accountants, and treasurer's office for making sure that we got what we needed when we needed it, and for making sure our paychecks kept flowing. They did an excellent job. We were never told no. Whatever we needed, we got, and thank you for that. The police department employees, last but in no way the least, is the employees that I supervise. I want to thank them for always being there throughout the pandemic, whether they were engaged in COVID preparation, food distribution, community engagement, or responding to calls. They have put community before self. Thank you for your professionalism in dealing with the standouts, the demonstrations, the protests across the greater Boston area that they responded to. I am sure that I have unintentionally left out individuals and departments, but what my comments should convey is that everyone in every department in this community is working together to collaborate to solve community issues, regardless of their title or department. It is the teamwork that has made this difficult year a successful one. And for that, I am thankful. The teamwork that you've never seen between police and fire and other communities is happening here. For Chief Flanagan's partnership and all the firefighters that have helped us and worked with the police department, we really appreciate them as well. In the middle of the pandemic, we also had other issues that we've had to deal with. And policy review is one of those issues that are consistently ongoing. No matter what we're in the middle of, we always have to remember and review our policies. Myself and the town manager spoke early on and began a proactive review of the Winthrop PD's use of force policy to ensure the compliance with current requirements and assess the policy in accordance with the National Aid Can't Wait principles. The Massachusetts Police Departments, including the Winthrop Police Department, have previously implemented the 8 use of force principles set forth in the National Aid Can't Wait campaign. However, a further review was conducted in good faith to assess the policy and review the same with the stakeholders, including the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. The town has worked with the town's attorney, K&P Law, to analyze the current policies. In addition, I have received feedback on the proposed changes by the union, and the WPD is vetting those policy updates with the District Attorney Rollins and her office regarding these updates. While no substantive changes have been made, modifications are being proposed to the policy to further implement the de-escalation principles and provide further guidance relative to the use of force at the WPD for operational and training purposes. This policy review was not as a result of any particular police incident, response, or complaint. The town manager and the police department wanted to be proactive and transparent in its review of the use of force policy, given the recent national police use of force incidents across the nation. WPD officers receiving training in de-escalation tactics, the duty to intervene, and reporting requirements, and further training and oversight will occur following the final adoption of the policy, with final updates after consultation with the community stakeholders. So I'm pleased where we are with this. After this policy is finalized, it will be posted on our town police department website. I'm just trying to get back to my screen. We'll post all of our policies, hopefully by the end of this fiscal year, so June 2030. But the first one that will go up will be the use of force policy. We do also, part of our accreditation standards is a use of force review. We do it on an incident-based and also a yearly basis. And that review will also be posted on the Town of Winthrop's public safety website. Some good news has come in since yesterday. We received a grant for about $29,800 from Executive Office of Public Safety for upgrading our dashboard cameras. The quote that we got to upgrade was $45,000. The grant that we received is $29,800. So we are shy. We can make modifications to the deployment of those cameras. Right now, we have them in the 3 line cruises. We were hoping to extend them out to all marked line cruises. So the wagon, as well as the supervisor's car, and the 9.5 additional cruiser that we use on details or when one goes down. And that would also include the replacement of a server. So it's we're hopeful that the town council might consider adding the $15,000 or $16,000 to the grant to fully implement those dashboard cameras. I do have on the line with me Janelle Austin from K&P Law. Janelle, would you like to add anything as the use of force policy goes?
Thank you, Chief. As the chief mentioned, our office has been working closely with the town manager's office and the police chief to review the use of force policy in good faith to ensure it meets current applicable legal standards. We have done that work, the town manager's office, as well as myself and the police chief. It is now being reviewed by community stakeholders for finalization. As a result of that process, there have been some minor modifications made. As the chief pointed out, the substantive policy has not changed, and the policy met the current accreditation standards in its prior form. However, modifications were made to further implement de-escalation tactics and also to work closely with training vehicles in terms of the 8 Can't Wait principles, which is happening both through police departments across the state as well as on the national level as well. I'd certainly defer if there are any questions, but happy to be here tonight and happy to work with the town on this important review. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle and Chief Delahanty. Very, very important stuff that we're working on. This was a huge national conversation. The chief and I spoke shortly after it. And the chief has been doing his due diligence to try to ensure that our police department, if the event comes up that there is a need to utilize force, that we are utilizing force correctly. So I, again, commend the actions of the chief on following up on this and working through some of these things. And Chief, you mentioned these things would be done by the end of fiscal 2030. I don't want to add 10 years
no.
life with that. So
June 30th, 2020.
There we go.
2021. The 2021. So the use of force will be done long before then. I'm hoping to have all my policies publicly available on our website by June 30th, 2021.
Great. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate the update. Moving on, the Center Business District Project. Steve Cal is on here, but just wanted to give a quick update on this. The water main improvements are scheduled to be completed by tomorrow. All sewer mains have been installed and 70% of the permanent sewer services have been installed. 70% of the storm drain improvements have been installed. GEOSO is going to be shutting things down on December 15th, and we will not be doing additional activities on this project until the spring of 2021. Spring is a little bit of a nebulous term. Let's see how bad this winter is and how frozen our surfaces are, because it may be something that we can get working on a little bit earlier than maybe April, for instance. There's a list of roads that will be completed in the spring of 2021 in terms of storm drain improvements. And then all of the above ground work will be starting next year. So really exciting to think about a center that the above ground stuff looks a little bit more clean and modern, but is also accessible and safe for everyone to utilize. There's going to be some streetscape improvements and things like that. But we've seen some really interesting things from the community this year. The painting that happened within some of the parking spots, the outdoor dining. The town got a shared streets grant from the state that we're actually utilizing to buy parklets to be installed. And those they're actually coming next month, but it's been a very long process because parklets are very popular in the entire world right now, with people not being able to engage in indoor dining in the same way. But, you know, the center, the businesses have done a great job of dealing with the extensive amount of work that's been happening in the center. It's another year that we have of work to do, but then for the hopefully foreseeable future, we will not be having to allocate so much funding to infrastructure work there. And hopefully, again, it is a great business district for the town where people can congregate. We can get back to lighting trees during the holidays, those types of things that I know are important to the community. I love Winthrop Day and things like that. Back when we're in a world where we can get back together, you're gonna have a great place to kind of congregate and get together. So it's exciting that we are essentially through the first year of this project, which is something that when I signed my contract here and the council voted against the financing of this project in the summer of 2018, I was not sure that this project was going to happen. So the fact that we're this far along is very exciting. A note from the Transportation and Safety Advisory Committee, there are 2 meetings to solicit public input on the Point Shirley resident parking pilot program that happened this summer. Those will happen on Wednesday, December 9th and on Wednesday, December 16th. The Wednesday, December 16th meeting is their normal TSAC meeting that happens at 8 a.m. Anyone's welcome to attend virtually. And if people want to provide input, please email the TSAC at town.winthrop.ma.us email. You can physically mail things to Town Hall to go to TSAC or to Mike DeLuiso directly. So, you know, a few things to hit on to kind of try to wrap things up. First off, you know, this next calendar year is going to be hard again, unfortunately. The quicker that vaccine, whatever comes out and is readily publicly available and there are doses for lots of us to go around, cannot come soon enough. These restrictions will unfortunately, let me put on another headphone so this doesn't mess up on me. All right, can you guys still hear me? All right, good. These restrictions are still going to be in place for the foreseeable future. As I said, these things may be we may be not necessarily rolling back phases, but ramping up some of the restrictions that were in place earlier this year, unfortunately. The CARES Act funding expires at the end of this calendar year, and there is no additional federal funding that is currently in place. We all are hopeful that a bipartisan effort is made to support both everyone, essentially. People need money in their pockets. Businesses need help. We need to give those businesses the help. People need help with rent. People need help with mortgages, all different types of things. Hopefully some type of large scale stimulus can happen and help out everyone involved because we will need help in Winthrop. The education concerns will remain. Although there have been votes and we're looking at bringing back students in school in January in some fashion, those things, these plans can change. And I think that that has been, unfortunately, the thing that's been the most evident since March. We went from our kids going to school every day to our kids not going to school at all. And then having certain kids go to school and certain kids going to school certain days of the week and stuff like that. It has been hard for everyone. And as a parent, I am very sympathetic to other parents in this situation. I don't know what to say about making this situation with education better. It's unfortunately something that is outside of my purview as a town manager. And I'm trying as hard as possible to listen to the expertise that comes from our superintendent and our public health director and our board of health and officials at the state. I can't say necessarily what is right in this situation. And I know it's hard for everyone. But these concerns with education from all different viewpoints are unfortunately gonna keep going for a little while. And then in fiscal 22, when Anna and I eventually present a budget in a few months, we're gonna have to try to reconcile the financial impacts of COVID-19 on the town's revenue. So Anna went through that pretty extensively, but again, just to reiterate, it was hard projecting fiscal 21 before COVID and making sure our budget worked before COVID. Then COVID happened and we had to change our expectations. And COVID has been around, from my perspective, significantly longer than I had initially expected. So we are going to have to, unfortunately, deal with some of the longer term impacts of COVID in our fiscal 22 budget as well. And that most likely will hit our revenue side. But again, to kind of wrap this up, I want to echo some of the statements of Chief Delahanty. This job it's not really possible for me to do without my staff. They have been through the ringer this year. Everything from questioning people's work ethic to their ability to do their jobs type of stuff. These people have worked. And as the chief said, we went from 35-hour-a-week jobs to essentially every minute that we're awake type of jobs. Meredith and I talk in the morning, we talk at nights. I talk with Anna way too frequently. It's been something that, my core staff, the public safety directors, or the chiefs, Anna, a couple of, Steve Calla, a couple others, we have talked almost every day since March 16th. And again, this is all in an effort to keep people safe. So as we kind of transition into this Thanksgiving season, let's think about the things that the chief said about what we're thankful for. I shared with my staff that I'm thankful for this staff. I'm thankful for this job. I'm thankful for this council to work with, and I'm thankful for Winthrop giving me the opportunity. On a personal note, a year ago, my daughter barely had any hair, and a year later, she kind of got over alopecia. And although this year has been insane, I'm very happy that my daughter can put her hair into a little ponytail. So there are little things that all of us have in our lives in this immense struggle that we have had over this year that we can all be thankful for. This is a community. And again, all of these things have been in the intent to try to keep people healthy and safe, because if people are hurt and sick and dying in our community is going to be hurting, and our community has been hurting in this year. But try as hard as possible to try to put those things in their place. Have the good food over Thanksgiving. No one's going to be mad at you if you eat seconds when it's only you and your family eating dinner together. So with that, I thank everyone for the time and for allowing me to make this presentation tonight. I know we went over a lot of information. I'll take a few questions, and then we can, if people want to email questions into my office, I can come up with some more comprehensive answers and have some stuff ready for the next council meeting next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Town Manager Austin Fraser, for a very informative forum. To everyone that participated in the forum, I say thank you as well very much. We will now be open for some questions and answers briefly. If there are in-depth questions that any of you have, please call the town manager directly and he will answer them. But the number again to call in is 646-558-8656. The ID number is 816-8694-5197. Is there anyone waiting to ask questions, speak on public comment? I see Jeremy is back. Okay. You want to open him?
I am back. I apologize for my microphone cutting out earlier, but I want to revisit two things. I'd like to revisit the installation of the dog park using the mitigation money from Massport. The second thing is, I live in Point Shirley. I'm in the flight path. The air quality, so air quality and pollution noise from Massport affects me, it affects my spouse, it affects everybody in my neighborhood. For the past 2 days, I have done extensive research finding airports across the US that have populations living directly around the airport, strong communities around the airport. Every airport that I have found with a very tight population around it, such as Winthrop, they are using their mitigation money for soundproofing. They're using it for air quality monitoring devices in communities. They are actually insulating schools, the windows and doors in the schools, and improving the HVAC systems so that the air quality for the kids in the classrooms is of the highest caliber. We're not doing that. In my neighborhood alone, I've talked to all of my neighbors just on my street alone. None of these people, with the exception of one, has had soundproofing. My house was built in 1955. My house is 65 years old. When I contacted Massport last year, they said I was not eligible for soundproofing because it had been done, I had windows in 1980. Do the math. The bottom line is the mitigation money should be used to help people in the communities, in our community of Winthrop and Point Shirley, who are dealing with the fallout of the Terminal E expansion. And we're not doing that, to my knowledge. So my question is, I understand that a dog park is beneficial to the community on a certain level, but to me, that's not what this mitigation money is supposed to be for. And when I spend, say, 4 or 5 hours, and I'm happy to send the town council all of the data that I've found. In fact, the Burlington, Vermont International Airport in September just allocated their mitigation money, and they are actually going to replace the windows and doors and HVAC systems in all of the schools that are in close proximity to the airport. I don't understand why we're not doing this kind of stuff here. I don't see it happening, and you know, maybe it is, but I've talked to people here. I reached out to Gina Cassetta at the Hazards Committee only to find out she's gone. Who is our rep now between Winthrop for the Hazard Committee and Massport? Who am I supposed to turn to?
So Jeffrey, can I answer a couple of these questions for you?
You want to do it, Austin, or you want me to?
Sure. So Gina just retired, what was that, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, Phil? Or resigned from that position. So we are looking to put someone onto that committee. I know that's something that's important to the council president. Again, in terms of the mitigation money for the Winthrop Foundation, the Winthrop Foundation is a 501c3 and has its own board that determines how to allocate that funding. If you would like to advocate on behalf of some type of funding, that is the group that you should talk to. They do not work on behalf of the town. They are an independent, not-for-profit 501c3. In terms of funding that the town has received in the other pilot agreement that the town has with Massport, prior to me coming here, yet I am in full agreement with this, as the assistant town manager, Anna Friedman, went over in our financials, the town of Winthrop is in a difficult financial situation. And that money, when it was initially agreed upon in the pilot agreement, was to add to the general fund. That is how that money was utilized. Massport and the FAA dealt directly with individuals in town concerning the soundproofing of windows and things like that. So the town, it's a pilot agreement is a payment in lieu of taxes. So we can't tax that property. We have explored different things that we could try to tax on the airport, looking at their jet fuel and things like that. Unfortunately, we were not able to do that. We continue to engage with Massport concerning the soundproofing, but the Winthrop Foundation concerning soundproofing, that is something that the Winthrop Foundation would have to make a decision on themselves. Us as a town, at this point in time, with our financial status, we have not been able to engage on the soundproofing of residents' properties as a town operation, because we have tried to utilize Massport and have Massport take on this type of project.
Okay, I have a question to that. So there was an article in the Winthrop Transcript, I believe dated in 2019. I'd have to pull it up. But that article, in that they talked about the dog park and the search for the perfect location. And one of those locations had been considered was Coughlin Park. I live right around the corner from Coughlin Park. One of the reasons, according to that article in the transcript, that Coughlin Park was not selected was due to the jet noise from the planes coming in to Logan. So if it's not a suitable area for a dog at Coughlin Park, how can it be suitable for people living directly across the street from Coughlin Park not to have soundproofing? That makes no sense.
Jeremy, that's not the case concerning the dog park, but
Austin, please. Public comment is 3 minutes, and Jeremy, I get the picture, but the money that we get for the pilot program, it's in lieu of taxes, and it can't be used for that purpose. We are fighting with FAA to get soundproofing done. I would like you to file an application to be on the Airport Hazards Committee. Since you're doing this research on your own, why not do it for the town and put an application? I'd be happy to put you on the Airport Hazards Committee. I'm looking for 3 new members as it is. And
I appreciate that. I'm actually on TSAC.
Jeremy,
you already appointed me to TSAC, so I don't think I can be on anything else.
No, you can serve on multiple committees. And right now, the person that we have as the CAC on the Airport Hazards Committee is Jerry Falmo. He's been on it for quite some time, but he is the Citizens Advisory Committee to Massport. The person in contact now is Jerry Falmo. Okay. But Jeremy, please put an application in, and is there any other callers on? And I want to remind everybody that it's 3 minutes.
Yes, we have Leo.
Leo, you're back.
I'm back. I would like to give my 3 minutes to Jeremy so he can get his question answered.
Okay, but his question was answered. But go ahead, Jeremy, if you're on. All right, do you have anything, Leo? Is there anyone else on?
I don't see any other hands up. I'm sorry.
Shannon Poulos.
Shannon Poulos.
Hi, everybody. I know I sent everybody an email tonight, and I wasn't going to talk because, frankly, it's kind of an emotional topic for me, but I'm going to do it anyway. You know, I've lived here for 42 years of my life. Shannon Riley Poulos, my family has been here forever. I'm not going to lie. I see a shift in this community, and it's disturbing. I want to address specifically the Pledge of Justice statement that was proposed by Councilor Honan. And I want to read what I wrote because I just don't want to get off topic. I want to be very clear. I fundamentally 100% agree with the spirit of justice for all, equality for all, fairness for all, as it was underlined in the statement. That said, I do feel that parts of the pledge, specifically the 3rd paragraph, targets not only the bad police officers who perpetrated crimes or allegedly perpetrated crimes, but can lead to a more holistic or general view that all police are bad, pitting good cops against our community. And I am seriously, seriously worried about that. I think it portrays an otherwise virtuous and really, really important message as negative. And I think that's something that should represent all of Winthrop, not just what some people feel. I'm going to talk about some things that are happening behind the scenes that maybe not all people are aware of, but there is rhetoric being spread on these groups that otherwise hold themselves out to be of moral high ground. I want to just share a key takeaway from an article. This is not my words. This is a key article, a key takeaway that was from an article that was spread by one Winthrop. And I quote, "The police system is inherently inequitable and deeply rooted in racism and white supremacy." This same group accused our police chief of deliberate attempt to hide and brush under the rug an racist incident. Now, the incident allegedly happened and it should be dealt with. But to falsely accuse our police chief of brushing under the rug without doing due diligence is not only disrespectful, but it's irresponsible. The response I got from an individual in that group was, he should be strong enough to take it. That absolutely should not be our bar for truth. That is not justice, and that is not fairness for all. It is not. I was recently with a friend, and she told me the other day, and perhaps I was very naive, but she said, "You know, Shannon, you have a support the police on your lawn. Don't you realize people think you're a Trump supporter and a racist?" I was so appalled by that. It made me so angry. It made me so sad that at the same time, I'm a proud independent. I voted Republicans. I voted Democrats. This particular election, I chose to vote Democrat because I personally feel that Donald Trump is the most vile human being alive. So to be told that because I support the police, because I support my brother, who, by the way, wears a bulletproof vest to work every day, I'm considered to be a racist and a Trump supporter, it shook me. And that's why I'm writing this letter and supporting and speaking today. I do not believe we should throw out the baby with the bathwater. The pledge, of course, is important. It's important we should come together in unity as a community and look out for all of our community members, regardless of particular race, creed, sexual orientation, political party, or political affiliation, or profession. I ask you to reconsider the language in this pledge and the tone so that it is not perceived to be overly negative to police and divisive. Please, I urge you that we balance our message as a community to be for all of us, not to be one-sided. I say this strongly. I love this town so much, and I know many of us do. Please, let's keep Winthrop what it is. Thank you.
Sharon. I agree with you, Sharon, and I have sent it to the Rules and Ordinance Committee to be reviewed. And I believe Councilor Honan has agreed to review it and maybe amend it. And I think it will be the right statement when it comes out of there. But you can attend the Rules and Ordinance Committee meeting to make yourself heard, and they have that hearing this coming week.
Could I quickly speak for just a moment? So the statement I read a few weeks ago included a pledge. The pledge was not the whole statement. The statement was mine alone, and I was very clear about it was only my statement, not the entire council's. The pledge that I asked the town council to take is the last paragraph, and it specifically says, I asked the town council to take this pledge, and it goes on and on for 2 or 3 sentences. And it's only that very last part of my statement that is the pledge. Just want that to be clear.
Thank you. Are there any other people on who want to be heard in public comment? I don't see any other hands.
No, I don't see any hands.
Okay. Hearing none, we'll close public comment. And there are immediate openings for the Board of Health will be coming up at the end of December. Citizens Finance Advisory Board, I have 1 or 2 applications for that. Airport Hazards Committee, I have not received an application for it, and I do need applications. I've asked 3 or 4 people already, but please get applications in. If you would like to serve on the Airport Hazards Committee, and that means you, Jeremy, you can serve on both. And anyone else that would like to come on to the Airport Hazards Committee, I have an opening on the Conservation Commission. So please, if you'd like to be on any one of the committees in town, please go on to the website and put an application in. I will let you know that the holiday lighting special will be aired on virtually on WCAT on November 27th. People can send personal greetings to be aired first at 617-846-9898. Does anyone else have any other announcements to make? If not,
President Boncory?
oh, yes.
Just real quick, I sent you an application for a candidate for the Board of Health.
Yeah, I have 3 for the Board of Health.
Okay.
I do have 3 for the Board of Health. All right, which I am considering which of the 3 I'm going to appoint. Okay, does anyone else have any announcements? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion's been made by Vice President Lettieri, seconded by Councilor Gero. Is no discussion? All those in favor, please say aye when your name is called.
Hello.
Yes.
Councilor Flock.
Yes.
Councilor DeMarco.
Yes.
Councilor Christopher.
Yes.
Councilor Honan.
You're muted.
Yes.
Councilor Conti.
Yes.
Councilor Farino. Council Vice President Lettieri.
Yes.
President Boncory.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Winthrop, please be safe. Have a very happy Thanksgiving, and I wish you all the best. Please be safe. Meeting is adjourned.